The cardiac monitor's scream sliced through the penthouse silence at 3:47 a.m. Charles Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries and one of America's wealthiest men, clutched his chest as pain radiated down his left arm like lightning through copper wire. His 72-year-old body, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and bending markets to his will, betrayed him on the marble floor of his $45 million Manhattan residence. The irony wasn't lost on him, even in those desperate seconds, that all his billions couldn't stop the muscle in his chest from seizing. What Charles Whitmore didn't know, as his vision tunneled and consciousness flickered, was that the woman about to save his life was the daughter he'd mourned for 33 years. The baby girl he'd been told died during childbirth in a rural Mississippi hospital. The child whose loss had calcified his heart long before arteries could. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how these two strangers, connected by blood, separated by lies, divided by race and circumstance, came to this moment, you need to go back. Back to 1991, back to a love that defied the brutal social codes of the Deep South, and a tragedy that shaped two very different destinies. Charles Whitmore III wasn't supposed to fall in love with Sarah Jenkins. The 24-year-old heir to the Whitmore textile fortune had returned to Mississippi after graduating from Harvard Business School, ostensibly to learn the family business from the ground up. His father, Charles Whitmore II, believed a summer managing one of their regional factories would teach his son humility and the value of the family empire built on cotton processing and garment manufacturing. Instead, Charles learned something far more dangerous: that love doesn't consult bank statements or family trees. Sarah Jenkins worked the night shift on the cutting floor. 22 years old, midnight black skin that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, hands that moved across fabric with the precision of a surgeon. She was saving money for nursing school, had already completed 2 years at Meridian Community College while working full-time. Her dream was to become a pediatric nurse, to heal children who looked like the ones in her neighborhood, kids whose families couldn't afford the kind of medical care that Charles's family took for granted. Their first conversation happened during a machinery breakdown at 2 a.m. Charles, trying to prove himself by working the floor alongside the laborers, was covered in machine grease and frustration. Sarah approached with a clean rag and a knowing smile. "You're holding the wrench backwards, Mr. Whitmore." He looked down at his hands, then at her. "Charles, Charles. I know who you are." Her voice carried no malice, just fact. "And you still got that wrench backwards." What happened over the next 6 weeks was reckless and beautiful and doomed. They met in secret. In the break room. After hours, once at a diner in Jackson, 40 miles away, where nobody knew the Whitmore name, Charles discovered that Sarah possessed an intellect sharper than half his Harvard classmates, and a worldview that challenged everything he'd been taught about merit, privilege, and the natural order of things. Sarah saw in Charles something unexpected: genuine curiosity, the willingness to listen, the beginnings of a conscience trying to break free from decades of conditioning. "You really don't see it, do you?" she asked him one night in August, sitting in his car at the edge of a cotton field under stars that seemed close enough to touch. "The factory, your family's wealth, this whole system, it's built on our backs. Your grandfather got rich because my grandmother picked cotton for pennies." "That was a different time," Charles protested weakly. "Was it?" Sarah's eyes held his. "I make $6.15 an hour cutting fabric for suits that sell for what I earn in a month. You telling me that's different?" Charles had no answer, but he had something more powerful. He was falling in love with her. Hopelessly, recklessly in love. By September, Sarah was pregnant. Charles wanted to marry her. In his naive, privileged understanding of the world, He believed love and money could solve anything. He would tell his parents, weather their disapproval, use his trust fund to build a new life. They'd move to Boston or New York, somewhere cosmopolitan and progressive, where interracial marriage wasn't still whispered about in scandalized tones. Sarah knew better. "You don't understand what you're asking," she told him in October, her hand resting on the barely visible swell of her belly. "Your family won't just disapprove, Charles. They'll destroy you. And me? I'll be the black woman who trapped the white heir. My family's lived in Meridian for 4 generations. Where am I supposed to go?" But Charles was insistent. Emboldened by love and youth, and the arrogance of someone who'd never truly faced consequences, he marched into his father's study on a Friday evening in late October and announced his intentions. What happened next broke something fundamental in Charles Whitmore III. His father listened in silence. No rage, no theatrics. Just cold, calculating silence. Then Charles Whitmore II made a phone call. Then another. By Monday morning, Sarah Jenkins had been fired from the factory. Her mother, who worked as a housekeeper for one of the Whitmore family's business associates, was let go. Her younger brother, who had a scholarship at a private school funded by Whitmore charitable donations, was quietly expelled for a fabricated disciplinary issue. The message was clear: pursue this, and we'll systematically dismantle everything your family has built. But Charles Whitmore II wasn't finished. He made Charles III an offer, a deal wrapped in poison and presented as mercy. "You're young and stupid, and you've made a mistake," his father said, voice cold as January rain. "That girl and her situation can be handled quietly. We'll pay for the best medical care, ensure she's taken care of. She can give the child up for adoption to a good family, get on with her life. You'll go to New York, start your career at our firm there. In 5 years, this will feel like a bad dream. And if I refuse, then you get nothing. No trust fund, no position in the company, no family. You'll be cut off completely. And I will personally ensure that Sarah Jenkins never works in this state again. Neither will anyone in her family." Charles faced the terrible arithmetic of powerlessness. At 24, with no money of his own, no career, no resources beyond his family name, what could he actually offer Sarah? How could he protect her from the institutional power his family wielded? He told himself he was being practical, mature, that he was protecting Sarah by stepping back, by not dragging her through a war she couldn't win. But late at night, in the decades that followed, Charles knew the truth. He was a coward. Sarah checked into Meridian General Hospital on March 15, 1991. Charles had been in New York for 4 months, calling weekly at first, then monthly, the conversations growing shorter and more strained. He'd sent money for medical care, which Sarah had accepted only because she had no choice. Her own pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The labor was difficult. 37 hours of complications that Charles's money couldn't smooth away. The baby, a girl 6 pounds and 4 ounces, with skin the color of rich caramel and a cry that could wake the dead, arrived at 6:23 a.m. on March 16th. Sarah held her daughter for 7 minutes. Then a nurse Charles's father had paid, a woman whose mortgage had been quietly purchased by Whitmore Industries, whose son's medical school tuition was suddenly, mysteriously covered, took the baby under the preteens of routine examination. Sarah never saw her daughter again. When she woke from exhausted sleep 3 hours later, a doctor she'd never met stood beside her bed, with eyes that couldn't quite meet hers. "I'm very sorry, Miss Jenkins. There were complications we couldn't anticipate. Your daughter didn't survive." The sound Sarah made wasn't quite human. It was the noise of something breaking that can never be repaired. They gave her papers to sign, They gave her sedatives. They gave her everything except the truth. Miles away, a white couple from Birmingham, childless after years of trying, their adoption arranged through private channels and sealed records, welcomed a beautiful mixed-race baby girl into their home. They named her Jennifer. They loved her fiercely. They never knew her father was a billionaire or that her mother thought she was dead. And in New York, Charles received a phone call from his father. "It's done. The child didn't survive the birth. I'm sorry, son, but it's probably for the best. You can move forward now." Charles Whitmore III wept for 3 days. Then he buried his grief under 18-hour workdays and the relentless pursuit of success. He threw himself into building his empire with the single-minded intensity of someone running from ghosts. He never married, never had other children, and he never, ever returned to Mississippi. Grief, Charles discovered, was excellent fuel for ambition. He channeled his pain into something productive, proving his father wrong. Not about Sarah, that wound was too raw to approach directly, but about everything else. Charles Whitmore II believed his son was soft, idealistic, unsuited for the ruthless calculations required to build real wealth. Charles III would show him otherwise. He started in the investment division of Whitmore Industries, analyzing textile manufacturing operations across the Southeast. But Charles quickly saw what his father, locked into legacy thinking, couldn't. The American textile industry was dying. Cheap labor overseas, mechanization, changing consumer preferences. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was spray-painted in neon. His first major report recommended divesting from textile manufacturing entirely and pivoting to real estate development and financial services. His father rejected it outright. "Whitmores have made textiles for 3 generations. Then we'll be the generation that goes broke doing it," Charles shot back. The fight lasted months, but Charles had something his father didn't. He'd spent time on the factory floors, seen the operations from the inside. He knew the margins were razor thin, the workforce aging, the infrastructure decaying. He built a case so airtight, backed by such meticulous data, that even Charles II couldn't dismiss it. Reluctantly, his father gave him $50 million to prove his theory. Charles took that money and bought 3 distressed office buildings in Lower Manhattan in 1993. Properties everyone said were finished, located in neighborhoods the city had written off. He renovated them on brutal timelines and impossible budgets, bringing them in as mixed-use developments that combined commercial and residential space. He sold all 3 by 1995 for $240 million. His father never questioned him again, but success tasted like ash. Every victory, every deal, every billion added to the family fortune. None of it filled the void left by Sarah and the daughter he'd never held. Charles worked because work was the only thing that made the ghosts quiet. 90-hour weeks, red-eye flights, mergers and acquisitions that he approached with the intensity of military campaigns. By 1998, he'd taken control of Whitmore Industries. His father, battling illness and facing the reality that his empire would crumble without his son, stepped aside. Charles restructured everything, selling off the textile operations and transforming the company into Whitmore Capital, a real estate and private equity firm that would eventually grow to manage over $40 billion in assets. He was brilliant. He was ruthless. And he was completely, utterly alone. His few attempts at relationships failed spectacularly. How could he explain to the elegant socialites and ambitious executives he dated that he was haunted by a woman he'd loved 3 decades ago? That he dreamed about a daughter who died before she could live? He couldn't. So he didn't try. Instead, Charles built an empire as a monument to everything he'd lost. Every building that bore his name, every successful deal, every $1 billion. They were all tombstones marking the death of the man he might have been. Jennifer Matthews grew up knowing she was adopted. Her parents, Robert and Patricia Matthews, a high school teacher and a librarian, never hid the truth. They couldn't have, even if they'd wanted to. Jennifer's honey-brown skin and black curls told a story no amount of love could erase. "You were chosen," Patricia would tell her daughter. "Out of all the children in the world, we chose you." And Jennifer was loved, completely, fiercely, without reservation. But love doesn't shield you from the world's complicated arithmetic of race and belonging. Jennifer learned early that she existed in multiple spaces and fully belonged to none. Too black for some of her white classmates, too white adjacent for some of the black kids in her school, adopted into whiteness but wearing blackness on her skin. She learned to navigate, to code switch, to be chameleon-like in her social adaptation. But the questions haunted her. Who were her birth parents? Why had they given her up? What had she inherited beyond skin tone and curl pattern? Her adoptive parents knew only the basics. Closed adoption, birth mother from Mississippi. No father listed on the original birth certificate. The records were sealed. The trail was cold. So Jennifer built her identity from scratch. She excelled in school, driven by the same fierce intelligence her birth mother possessed. She volunteered at hospitals, discovering early that helping people in crisis gave her a sense of purpose that nothing else could match. "I want to be a paramedic," she announced at 16. Her father frowned. "You're smart enough to be a doctor, sweetheart." "I don't want to meet people in hospitals, Dad. I want to meet them in the worst moments of their lives and be the reason they make it to the hospital." She meant it. Jennifer had found her calling in emergency medicine's brutal immediacy. No time for second-guessing, no room for hesitation. Just pure instinct, training, and the will to save lives when every second counted. She put herself through EMT training, then paramedic certification. She worked her way through Birmingham's toughest neighborhoods, responding to shootings and overdoses and heart attacks and domestic violence calls that would break most people. Jennifer developed a reputation: unflappable, brilliant under pressure, capable of making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. She'd talk down suicide attempts in soft, steady tones. She'd perform emergency tracheotomies with pocket knives when advanced airways failed. She'd hold the hands of people breathing their last and make sure they didn't die alone. Her partners called her Angel. Not because she was soft. Jennifer could curse with creativity that would make sailors blush, but because when she showed up, people survived situations they had no business surviving. By 2015, at 24, she'd earned enough commendations to wallpaper her apartment. But recognition wasn't what drove her. She worked because every life saved felt like it meant something, like she was balancing some cosmic equation she didn't fully understand. She never stopped wondering about her birth parents, never stopped feeling the ghost of that missing piece. In January 2024, Jennifer accepted a position with New York City Emergency Medical Services. The pay was better, the challenges more complex, and, though she wouldn't admit it to anyone, she hoped a new city might quiet the restless feeling that had followed her since childhood. New York embraced her. The city's beautiful chaos, its aggressive diversity, its refusal to fit anyone into neat categories. Jennifer thrived in it. She worked out of Station 17 in Manhattan, running calls in neighborhoods where millionaires and minimum wage workers lived blocks apart. She was good at her job, better than good. In her first 6 months, she logged over 200 successful emergency responses, including 3 near-impossible saves that made the department's internal highlights. But Jennifer's past never quite let her rest. She'd submitted her DNA to 3 ancestry services, hoping for matches that might lead to biological family. Nothing significant. She'd tried hiring a private investigator to unseal her adoption records. Mississippi's laws made it nearly impossible. So she did what she'd always done. She buried herself in work. Let the job consume her. Let other people's emergencies drown out her own unresolved questions. She had no idea that on a cold February morning, a 911 call would answer every question she'd ever asked and raise 1,000 more. The call came through as a Code 3 cardiac emergency. Unresponsive male, 72, possible MI at a Midtown East residence. Jennifer and her partner, Marcus Chen, had the closest unit. Another Valentine's heart attack, Marcus muttered, navigating through empty pre-dawn streets. Fifth one this week. Hallmark should warn people about this. Jennifer was already reviewing cardiac protocols in her mind, running through medication dosages and intervention sequences. She'd done this hundreds of times. Chest compressions, defibrillator, IV access, nitro if indicated, transport to nearest cardiac-capable facility. Just another save. The building's doorman met them in the lobby, face pale. Penthouse level. Mr. Whitmore, his security called it in. Something about the name tickled the edge of Jennifer's awareness, but there was no time to process. They rode the elevator in tense silence, Jennifer's hand steady as she mentally cataloged the equipment in her jump bag. The penthouse doors were already open. A security guard, 60-something and shaking, pointed toward the bedroom wing. In there. I started CPR, but I think... We've got it. Jennifer cut him off, already moving. Charles Whitmore lay on the bedroom floor in silk pajamas, skin the color of old newspaper, lips tinged blue. No pulse. No respirations. The monitor Marcus slapped on showed ventricular fibrillation. The heart was quivering uselessly instead of beating. Jennifer's hands moved on autopilot. Starting compressions. She interlaced her fingers, positioned them on the lower sternum, and began the rhythmic 30 compression sequences that would keep blood flowing to his brain. Marcus charged the defibrillator. Clear! Jennifer's hands lifted. The shock delivered. Charles's body convulsed. Still fib. Resume CPR, Jennifer commanded, settling back into compressions. Charge again. Marcus, get me IV access and push 1 milligram of epi. They fell into the practice dance of emergency medicine. Shock, compressions, medications. Check rhythm. Repeat. Time compressed and expanded simultaneously. Seconds felt like hours, but Jennifer knew they'd been working for less than 3 minutes when she felt the flutter under her hands. A heartbeat, weak and irregular, but present. We've got sinus rhythm, Marcus confirmed, watching the monitor. BP's coming up. 90/60. Charles Whitmore's eyes fluttered open. For a moment he seemed disoriented, pupils dilating as he processed fluorescent lights and unfamiliar faces hovering over him. His gaze traveled from Marcus to the security guard to Jennifer. Then his eyes locked on her face, and something happened that Jennifer would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. Charles Whitmore's expression shifted through confusion, recognition, disbelief, and something that looked like grief compressed into the span of a single breath. His hand, shaking but deliberate, reached toward her face. His lips moved. His voice, ravaged by the ordeal, came out in a whisper that somehow carried the weight of 33 years. Sarah's eyes. Jennifer froze. Sir, you need to stay still. You've had a serious cardiac event. Your eyes. Charles's hand trembled in the air between them. Tears were streaming down his face now, though Jennifer couldn't tell if they were from physical distress or something else entirely. You have Sarah's eyes, Sarah's face. My God, you're alive. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to... Jennifer's training warred with the surreal quality of the moment. Patients said strange things after cardiac events. Hypoxia could cause confusion. This didn't mean anything. But Charles gripped her wrist with surprising strength. What's your name? Jennifer Matthews. Sir, we need to transport you to... When's your birthday? The question was so unexpected, so specific, that Jennifer answered automatically. March 16th, 1991. The sound Charles made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. March 16th, my daughter's birthday. The daughter they told me died. His eyes never left her face. They told me you died. The world tilted. Jennifer's hands, which had remained steady through hundreds of life and death situations, began to shake. I don't understand what you're... Marcus, she heard herself say, voice distant and strange. Take over. I need. But she couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't know what she needed. Air. Space. For this man to stop looking at her like he was seeing a ghost. For the impossible thing he was suggesting to not be possible. Your mother, Charles continued, as Marcus moved to take over patient care. Sarah Jenkins, from Meridian, Mississippi. She worked at my father's textile factory. His voice cracked. I loved her. I wanted to marry her. But my father, they told me the baby died. They told me you died. Jennifer's professional composure, built over thousands of calls, shattered. I'm adopted. My birth mother. There's no name on my original birth certificate. Because they erased it. My family erased everything. Charles was sitting up now, ignoring Marcus's protests, his entire focus on Jennifer. You're my daughter. I know it. I've been searching for you in every face I see for 33 years, and I know. Sir, you're experiencing a serious medical emergency. You need transport to cardiac care. Then take me. But I'm not crazy. I'm not confused. Charles's hand found hers. Please, just tell me your adoptive parents. Where are you from? Birmingham. The word came out strangled. Robert and Patricia Matthews. They adopted me through a private arrangement. Sealed records. Birmingham. Charles closed his eyes. That's where my father sent you. I'm sure of it. A private adoption. Clean, untraceable. Paid for by Whitmore money. Jennifer's radio crackled. Dispatch asking for an update. Transport status. The ordinary mechanics of her job intruding on a moment that felt like reality fracturing. We need to move, Marcus said gently. Jennifer, I can ride with him if you need... No. The word came out fiercer than she intended. He's my patient. I'm seeing this through. Mount Sinai's cardiac unit received them with practiced efficiency. Charles Whitmore, Billionaire CEO, major hospital donor, VIP patient, was whisked into a private suite where cardiologists descended like well-dressed vultures. Jennifer should have cleared the call, returned to service, moved on to the next emergency. Instead, she stood in the hallway outside his room, every protocol screaming at her to leave, while something deeper kept her feet planted. A cardiologist emerged 40 minutes later. He's stable. Significant blockage in the LAD, but we caught it early thanks to your team's response. We'll likely do a catheterization later today, possibly a stent, placement. He's asking for you. I'm not family. I can't... He's quite insistent, and conscious enough to make his own decisions about visitors. Jennifer found herself walking into the room before she could overthink it. Charles Whitmore looked smaller in the hospital bed, wires and monitors reducing him to just another patient. But his eyes, when they met hers, held a clarity that transcended his physical vulnerability. Thank you, he said simply, for saving my life. It's my job. Is it your job to listen to a dying man's confession? You're not dying. Your prognosis is actually quite... I'm 72 years old, and I just had a massive heart attack. Let's not pretend. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. Please. Jennifer sat. Every instinct told her this was a mistake, that she should run from whatever he was about to say. But she'd spent her whole life wondering about her origins. And now this stranger, this patient, was offering answers. "Tell me about Sarah Jenkins," she heard herself say. So he did. Charles talked for an hour, his voice raw with emotion and regret. He told her about the summer of 1990, about falling in love with a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about himself, about the pregnancy, his father's threats, the impossible choice between love and survival, about the phone call that destroyed him. "They told me you died," he repeated, and the pain in his voice sounded fresh despite 3 decades. "I mourned you. I built an entire life around the hole you left. I never married because I couldn't imagine loving anyone the way I loved your mother. I never had other children because I couldn't bear the thought of replacing you." Jennifer's hands were shaking. It's too much. You can't possibly know I know." Charles's certainty was absolute. "I looked at you, and I saw Sarah. The exact same eyes, the shape of your face, the way you move, and your birthday. March 16th, the day my daughter was born, the day I was told she died. Coincidence? Do you believe that?" Jennifer didn't answer. She couldn't. Because somewhere deep in her cells, in the inherited memories that DNA carries, something recognized this man. Something felt the truth of what he was saying, even as her rational mind screamed impossible. "We can prove it," Charles said quietly. "DNA test. Simple, definitive. If I'm wrong, I'll accept it and never bother you again. But if I'm right," his voice broke, "if I'm right, then I've been given a miracle I never deserved." 3 days later, Jennifer sat in a genetics counselor's office, holding an envelope that contained answers to questions she'd carried since childhood. The DNA test results were unambiguous. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Charles Whitmore was her biological father. The confirmation should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt like an earthquake cracking open ground she'd thought was solid. Every assumption about her origins, every story she'd told herself about why she was given up for adoption, every piece of her identity, all of it had to be rewritten. She called her adoptive parents first, told them everything. Their silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, her father spoke. "We didn't know. The agency told us it was a birth mother who couldn't keep the baby. Private adoption, all legal. We never questioned." His voice cracked. "Are we going to lose you?" "No." The word came out fierce and certain. "No. You're my parents. You raised me. This doesn't change that." But everything had changed. Jennifer learned her birth mother's name, Sarah Jenkins, still living in Meridian, Mississippi, still grieving a daughter she thought died 33 years ago. She learned about the Whitmore family's systematic cruelty, the way they'd used power and money to separate 2 people who loved each other and steal a child from her mother. She learned that Charles had spent 3 decades building an empire on grief, that every $1 billion was a monument to the family he'd lost. And she learned something about herself. She was the product of a love story that had been sabotaged by racism and power, carried by a mother who'd been robbed of her child, raised by parents who'd loved her without knowing the truth, and saved by circumstances so unlikely they felt like cosmic intervention. Now she had to decide what to do with that knowledge. Charles Whitmore's recovery from his heart attack was complicated by emotional upheaval that made his cardiac issues seem simple by comparison. He hired a team of lawyers to investigate exactly how his father had orchestrated Jennifer's adoption. What they uncovered was a conspiracy of falsified death certificates, bribed medical staff, and sealed records that would have stayed buried forever if not for a random emergency call. Charles Whitmore II had died 10 years earlier, taking most of his secrets to the grave. But enough evidence remained to paint a picture of systematic deception that had destroyed 3 lives. I want to make this right, Charles told Jennifer during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. I know I can't give you back 33 years. I can't undo the damage my family caused, but I want to try. I don't want your money, Jennifer said flatly. I'm not offering money. I'm offering truth, justice, if such a thing exists, and a relationship if you're willing. Jennifer was wary. How do you build a relationship with a father you never knew? How do you reconcile the wealth and privilege he represented with the mother who'd been victimized by his family? How do you look at someone who let you go, even if he believed he had no choice? The answer, she discovered, was slowly. They met for coffee, then dinner. Charles asked about her life with genuine curiosity, her work, her passions, her experiences growing up adopted. He didn't try to claim a role he hadn't earned, or pretend the decades of separation could be erased by biology. You don't owe me anything, he told her. You saved my life. That's more than I deserve. I did my job, Jennifer countered. What happens now is separate from that. Then let me do mine, Charles said. Let me try to make amends. The hardest conversation was yet to come. Sarah Jenkins was 60 years old, living in the same neighborhood in Meridian where she'd grown up. She'd never married, never had other children. She'd become a nurse, just like she'd planned all those years ago, and spent 3 decades caring for sick children while grieving the daughter stolen from her. Charles hired investigators to find her, but when it came time to make contact, he knew he couldn't be the one to do it. That needed to be Jennifer's choice. She practiced the phone call 100 times. How do you tell someone their dead child is alive? How do you explain that you're the miracle they stopped believing in? In the end, Jennifer kept it simple. My name is Jennifer Matthews. I was born March 16, 1991, in Meridian General Hospital. I was told my birth mother's name was Sarah Jenkins. I was told she thought I died. The sound on the other end of the line was inhuman. 33 years of grief compressed into a single, shattering sob. Baby? Sarah's voice shook. My baby? I'm alive. I'm here. And I'd like to meet you, if you're willing. The reunion happened on Sarah's terms, in the small house she'd bought with money, saved from 3 decades of nursing. Charles offered to arrange something elaborate, but both women refused. This moment didn't need spectacle. Jennifer knocked on the door at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. When it opened, she saw herself looking back. 30 years older, weathered by grief and hard work, but unmistakably family. Sarah's hands came up to Jennifer's face, trembling as they traced features she'd only held for 7 minutes and mourned ever since. My baby. My beautiful baby. They stood in the doorway, crying for what felt like hours. Inside, over sweet tea and tears, they pieced together the truth. Sarah told Jennifer about the pregnancy, the labor, the moment her daughter was taken. She described waking to the lie that had shaped her entire life. I felt it, Sarah said. Even drugged, even exhausted, I felt that something was wrong. But I was young, and black, and poor, and they were Whitmores. Who was going to believe me? Jennifer told her about Birmingham, about Robert and Patricia Matthews, about growing up loved, but always feeling like a piece was missing. About becoming a paramedic, about the impossible coincidence of treating Charles Whitmore's heart attack. God's timing, Sarah whispered. He gave you back to me by having you save the man who lost you. They talked until the sun set and rose again. 33 years of stories compressed into marathon sessions that left both women emotionally exhausted and strangely at peace. The question of Charles hung between them. Do you hate him? Jennifer finally asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I did. For years, I carried that hate like a stone in my chest. But hate didn't bring you back. And the truth is, Charles was young and scared and bullied by people with more power than he knew how to fight. His crime was being a coward. His father's crime was being a monster. There's a difference. Have you talked to him? He's written. Letters, mostly. Apologizing, explaining, begging forgiveness. Sarah's smile was sad. I read them. All of them. I don't know if I can forgive him yet, but maybe someday. In the months that followed, Jennifer navigated a family structure that defied easy categorization. She had Robert and Patricia Matthews, who'd raised her and loved her and earned the title parents through action, not biology. She had Sarah Jenkins, the mother who'd been robbed of her, but welcomed her back with a grace that took Jennifer's breath away. And she had Charles Whitmore, the father she'd saved and was slowly, cautiously learning to know. Charles created a foundation in Sarah's name, $500 million dedicated to maternal health care in underserved communities, with a focus on ensuring Black mothers received the same quality of care as white mothers. He established scholarships for nursing students from low-income backgrounds. He funded investigations into sealed adoption records that might hide similar stories of families torn apart. I can't undo what my family did, he told Jennifer, but I can try to prevent it from happening to others. Jennifer continued working as a paramedic. She refused Charles's offers of financial support, insisting on earning her own way. But she accepted his presence in her life, dinners, phone calls, the awkward navigation of building a relationship backward. She flew to Meridian monthly to see Sarah. They cooked together, shared stories, built the mother-daughter relationship that had been stolen from them. Jennifer discovered she'd inherited Sarah's laugh, her stubbornness, her instinct for healing. The three of them, Jennifer, Charles, and Sarah, met occasionally. Difficult conversations in expensive restaurants, where the weight of history made small talk impossible. But gradually, carefully, they found a rhythm. Not a family in any traditional sense, but something that worked for them. Charles Whitmore stood at the podium of Mount Sinai Hospital's annual gala, preparing to accept an award for his foundation's work in maternal health care. Jennifer and Sarah sat in the audience, Jennifer in her paramedic dress uniform, having come directly from her shift, Sarah in a simple blue dress that Jennifer had helped her pick out. "A year ago," Charles began, "I had a heart attack that should have killed me. I was saved by a paramedic who happened to respond to my emergency. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that she was my daughter. The child I'd been told died at birth 33 years earlier." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the polished, impersonal speech they'd expected. "My father lied to me. He lied to my daughter's mother. He orchestrated an adoption designed to erase our connection and punish Sarah Jenkins for the crime of loving me. And he succeeded for 33 years. Charles's voice cracked. He found Jennifer's face in the crowd, then Sarah's. "I can't give back the time we lost. I can't erase the pain my family caused. But I can stand here and tell the truth. I can work to prevent other families from experiencing this horror. And I can spend the rest of my life trying to earn the forgiveness of the two women I failed." He stepped away from the podium and walked down to where Jennifer and Sarah sat. He knelt. This billionaire CEO, this titan of industry, knelt before them. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for letting me try to make this right." Jennifer reached out and took his hand. Sarah, after a long moment, did the same. The audience erupted in applause, but the three of them barely noticed. They were too busy holding on to each other, this impossible family reconstructed from lies and loss, and a miracle disguised as a medical emergency. 2 years after that night in the penthouse, Jennifer Matthews still works as a paramedic. She still shows up for 12-hour shifts, still runs into burning buildings and overdose scenes, and moments of human crisis, where everything hangs in the balance. But she comes home to something different now. She has Sunday dinners with Charles, where they argue about politics, and his tendency to overwork, and her refusal to let him spoil her. She has monthly trips to Mississippi, where she and Sarah cook collard greens and cornbread and talk about everything and nothing. She has Robert and Patricia, who've welcomed Sarah and Charles into their lives with the same generosity they showed Jennifer all those years ago. She has 2 fathers and 2 mothers and a family tree that makes no sense on paper but works in practice. Charles's health improved dramatically after his heart attack, both physically and emotionally. He stepped back from day-to-day operations of Whitmore Capital, focusing instead on the foundation work that's become his legacy. He's not trying to buy redemption. He's too smart to think it works that way. But he's trying to be better than the man who let fear override love. Sarah still works as a nurse, though Charles has offered her early retirement 100 times. "I'm not stopping just because you feel guilty," she tells him, with the directness that Jennifer inherited. But she accepted his help in opening a free clinic in her neighborhood, a place where kids who look like Jennifer get the same quality care as billionaires' children. The question people always ask Jennifer, was it worth it? She never quite knows how to answer. Worth what? The years she missed with her biological mother? The pain Sarah carried thinking her child was dead? The grief that calcified Charles's heart long before cholesterol could? But here's what Jennifer knows. On a cold February morning, she walked into a penthouse expecting another routine cardiac call and walked out with answers to questions that had haunted her entire life. She knows that sometimes miracles look like disasters. That family is both biology and choice. That love can survive decades of separation and lies. That forgiveness is harder and more important than justice. That you can save someone's life with CPR and defibrillation, but healing takes much longer. She knows that every call she runs, every life she saves, carries the echo of that moment when a dying man looked at her and saw his daughter. When coincidence and fate and the particular cruelty of genetics aligned to give 3 people a second chance, they never thought they'd get. Was it worth it? Ask Jennifer on the days when Sarah calls just to hear her voice. Ask her when Charles texts her articles he thinks she'll find interesting. Ask her when her 2 sets of parents gather for holidays that blend traditions in chaotic, beautiful ways. On those days, she'd say yes. Absolutely yes. But ask her late at night, when she thinks about the 33 years stolen from Sarah, the grief Charles carried, the mother and daughter who should never have been separated. On those nights, the answer is more complicated. Some broken things can be repaired, but they'll never be whole the way they should have been. Jennifer lives in that tension, between gratitude and rage, between the family she has and the years they lost, between the miracle of reunion and the crime that made reunion necessary. She saves lives for a living because it's the only math that makes sense anymore. Every person who survives because she showed up. Every family that stays intact because she knew exactly what to do in that critical moment. They're the counterweight to her own story. She can't give herself back the first 33 years, but she can make sure other people don't lose theirs. And on a cold February morning, when she walks into an emergency and sees someone fighting for their life, Jennifer Matthews doesn't think about DNA or adoptions or billionaire fathers or mothers who grieved for decades. She just does her job, because that's what angels do.